In 1986, Sega unleashed its seminal arcade hit Outrun. Lauded at the time for its unparalleled scaling visuals, incredible selectable soundtrack and compelling gameplay, it took the arcade by storm. Inspired by the film Cannonball Run, this driving game took players on a cross-country trip unlike any other. Filled with diverging paths and blue skies, it was a game so ahead of its time it wouldn't see an arcade perfect port until it came to the Sega Saturn over a decade later. In the intervening years, there were some attempts at a sequel. You had Turbo Outrun and Outrunners in the arcade, Outrun 3D, Outrun Europa and Battle Outrun on the Master System, and Outrun 2019 on the Mega Drive. But that magic simply couldn't be replicated. That is, until 2003.
Greetings, Sega fans. It's James The SEGAholic.
No,
here.
move over. Give me the wheel.
What are you doing?
Hello, it's Dan the Mega Driver with this episode of the SEGAGuys Race, and we're going to be covering the seminal sequel that is Outrun 2. Specifically, this is the Xbox port of Outrun 2. Even more specifically, this is the Xbox port of Outrun 2 running on an Xbox 360. So what's the story here? Well, after nearly 2 decades, AM2, the developers behind the original Outrun, finally gave Sega fans the sequel we always dreamed of. A fully polygonal, modern sequel that not only hit the same beautiful notes as the original, but expanded on them in new and meaningful ways. With Sega legend Yu Suzuki, the genius behind the original Outrun and so many other games, acting as producer, and Makoto Asaki and Shin Ishikawa acting as directors, they brought the iconic series power sliding into the 21st century. Now, power sliding and drift mechanics were added to the gameplay and woven into the game's intricate scoring system, with many other modern enhancements. AM2 also added a time attack mode, which is fairly standard for driving games, but they also added heart attack mode. Now, heart attack mode is a substantial addition. It sees you fulfill objectives in order to please your female passenger as you make your way through the course. It's an addition that complements the main game brilliantly. All in all, it's a perfect blend of old and new. Outrun 2 does an exceptional job of matching the original game's feel, from the blue skies and summer vibes to the branching paths and stages based on European locales just like the original game. The music is sublime as well, with updated renditions of original classics that sound pretty much perfect, and new music that, while not as iconic, doesn't sound out of place and actually sounds pretty fantastic as well. While the original Outrun had a legally distinct, not quite Ferrari Testarossa, its sequel has an official Ferrari license with 8 real cars from the GTS4 Daytona to the, at the time, brand new Enzo Ferrari. In a clever twist, the cars are grouped by difficulty for the player, so they can choose a car that fits their playstyle. Outrun 2 was developed for the then new Sega Chihiro board, arcade technology that was essentially an Xbox but with double the RAM. Think of what Naomi is to the Dreamcast and you wouldn't be far off. When Outrun 2 launched, history repeated itself and the game was very well received by the gaming media and arcade goers. Whilst not as original, innovative or influential as the first game, it was hailed as a near perfect sequel. A game that evoked the spirit of the 1980s arcade scene like no other. Of course, with that success came the prospect of a console port, and while the guts of the arcade board were similar to that of the Xbox, a version for that console wasn't a given, especially given the disparity in RAM. However, unlike some Chihiro-based games, Outrun 2 made its way over courtesy of a little company called Sumo Digital. Now, Sumo were a brand new company back in 2003, staffed by ex-Infogrames developers, they just finished assisting another team with Xbox Live implementation on another game. Microsoft, seemingly impressed by this work, and with a measure of influence given Outrun 2's use of Xbox technology, recommended Sumo to Sega for porting duties. Now when Sega met Sumo and revealed what they'd be working on, the British team apparently wanted to fall off their chairs in excitement. After all, who wouldn't? But they managed to keep it all under control with what Sega's producers described as perfect poker faces. Sumo then set out to make the game arcade perfect, and, for all intents and purposes, they achieved visual parity through texture compression and use of the Xbox hard drive for data caching. AM2 apparently, according to Sumo Digital, had exceptionally high standards, which I think many of us Sega diehards already guessed, so Sumo's ability to meet them really is a huge achievement. While Sumo did much of the porting duties, it was actually a collaborative project, since AM2, and I quote, got their hands dirty by taking care of the handling and ensuring that it was arcade perfect. Builds would go back and forth between AM2 in Japan and Sumo Digital in Sheffield, as both teams sought to nail that arcade perfect feel that was so important. But the collaboration didn't end there. Ferrari were yet another entity that had input over the game. Firstly, they reapproved the license, albeit with some guidance on how the car should perform, particularly when it came to driving safely, such as wearing seat belts or performing certain actions. But they also provided data which ensured that every car included was as accurate as possible. Together, they brought the arcade classic into the home. In an era where the arcade was slowly getting phased out, Outrun 2 came home with the love and care it deserved to make it truly arcade perfect. I'm actually playing it here on the Xbox 360 via backwards compatibility, and I think you can agree that it looks absolutely stunning. The port does support a widescreen mode, which I do prefer personally, though some do think that the stretched HUD detracts from the experience in this mode. But whether it's 16:9 or 4:3, it's a gorgeous looking game. But in 2004, were great looks and amazing gameplay enough? As an arcade game, Outrun 2 is already fairly rich in content, especially compared to the original, with the aforementioned 8 cars, 15 stages, 5 endings, as well as time attack and heart attack modes. But Sumo wanted to add more. First up was additional cars. 2 were added from the recent arcade update titled Outrun 2 SP, with the 512BB and 250 GTO both added to the roster. But Sumo went further by adding the F355 Spider and the 328 GTS, bringing the total number of cars to 12. While the American themed Special Tours 15 stage layout from Outrun 2 SP wouldn't come over, Sumo worked with AM2 to bring the handling improvements from that update into this port, whilst bolstering the home version with their own content. For starters, you do have a few new race options, such as playing against up to 7 CPU cars across Outrun's courses, or you could play against 7 other humans from across the globe via Xbox Live, before of course it was shut down. There's also local multiplayer, albeit it's turn-based. Now given the challenge of fitting the game onto an Xbox console, you can excuse the lack of split screen to an extent, though it is still a little disappointing. The biggest addition however is the mission mode. There are over 101 missions for players to complete, completion of which unlocks cards, which act as nice little collectibles and offer little factoids on Outrun and Ferrari. These also add other things as you unlock them, and this is where it gets really juicy. It's here that you unlock the full quota of cars, and you can also unlock additional music from the 1986 versions of the first game to new tunes from Richard Jacques. Fancy playing the original Outrun? You can unlock that too, although as you can see it's fairly glitchy when played on an Xbox 360. You can even unlock the arcade game courses in reverse to play if you wish. But the real prize are the bonus tracks, and though they aren't original, they come from 2 very special games.
In the dance, don't let them get in your way. Fire the monster, show you horror, now to steal you one thing.
Yes, that's right. The tracks from Scud Race and Daytona USA 2 Power Edition are here in all their glory. Sort of. First up, there's the challenge track from Daytona USA 2 Power Edition, which is effectively the three courses Advanced Joy Plus 2020 Amusement Park, Expert Virtual City, and Beginner Astro Waterfall Speedway minus the dope, all run as a single point-to-point race in that order. It actually makes its way to Outrun 2 quite accurately, and the nature of the challenge circuit fits Outrun 2's shifting stages. Meanwhile, Scud Race's 4 tracks also make their way over, so Dolphin Bay, Twilight Airport, Mystic Ruins and Classic Castle are all present, and you can find out more about those in detail in the SEGAholic Scud Race video. Unlike Daytona 2, these 4 tracks weren't originally stitched together in the arcade, so you do lose some of the authenticity here, but they're still an absolute blast to rip around, even if I am quite terrible at them. While the stage design is mostly authentic, you do lose a bit of vibrancy of the Model 3 Original's colour palette. Everything looks a little bit more pastel coloured and washed out, while some details like track surfaces have changed to standard roads, possibly due to Ferrari's guidance around safety. Ultimately though, this is the closest either game actually got to coming home to a console, and the only way you can play them today outside of emulation. Really, that makes Outrun 2 almost worthy of purchase alone. So, in answer to the question, is Outrun 2 an arcade and Xbox classic? I think you already know the answer to that. To this day, the producers of the port at Sumo Digital proclaim this to be one of the proudest moments in their career. A dream come true, many at the company have said. For us Sega fans, Outrun 2 really was a dream come true. A sequel we never thought we'd see in an era that had forgotten about arcades, delivered in a way that not only complements the first, but in many ways exceeds it. It's the perfect sequel to one of the quintessential arcade classics. With a perfect Xbox port, it literally doesn't get much better. Outrun 2 SP and SP SDX would follow in the arcade with different course layouts based on American routes, and they'd be followed by coast to coast and online arcade in the home. But the original Outrun 2 stands alone on Xbox and in the arcades, not only as the first and only proper sequel to Outrun, but as an entry with many features that are not seen in other ports, and that, in addition to everything else, makes it an all-time great. Post Outrun 2, Sega's arcade output would diminish as the market changed and they merged under Sega Sammy. Outrun 2 then could be viewed as the last hurrah for classic Sega, an epitaph to their former glory. And whilst we'd rather have retained the Sega of old, Outrun 2 was one hell of a way to bow out, and this Xbox port is as essential as games come. And that brings us to the end of the video. If you've made it here, I really hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for staying with us. If you enjoy the SEGAguys Race, then please check out the other videos courtesy of my friend the SEGAholic. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, as that really helps the channel. And if you do subscribe, we've got plenty of Sega content for you, including our fortnightly SEGAguyz podcast. But until next time, stay Sega and we will see you on the Sega side.